not gonna lie, this one's a really hard one for me. I have had a really hard time with this story. I have had a hard time even reading the details because of the things that play in my mind. So we're just going to watch the video, and I promise I'm going to try to make it through it. I really am.
He called 911 needing help, but then he was shot in the chest by an officer. This 11-year-old boy from Mississippi is now thankfully at home and recovering this morning, but his family is demanding to know why things went so wrong. CNN's Nick Valencia is tracking this story. Nick, I mean, obviously that is everyone's immediate reaction here is how does a child who calls the police for help end up being shot by the responding officer? What do you know?
Well, his mother tells me, Caitlin, that after Adarian Murray was shot in the chest by police, he asked his mother, what did I do wrong? Why did I get shot? And according to his mother, Nikayla Murray, all of this unfolded at 4 a.m. on Saturday when she says the father of a...
Like, I want y'all to look at this. He's a boy, you know? I'm not saying it makes it better that, you know, children who grow a little bit faster or whatever have the exact same treatment. Like, I'm not saying that, right? But, like, you can look at him. He is a baby, you know, like... And despite living in a country that literally demonizes just him just at birth, basically, for things that are beyond his control, namely his gender and his race. You know, he seems like a pretty sweet kid who still believed in justice and fairness and that, you know, the police are there to help you. He believed that if you just do everything right, that everything will be okay, that the authorities will come and protect the innocent people. He believed. And that's why when he got shot after doing everything right, that's why all he could ask is, what did I do wrong? You know, like, what did I do wrong? Keep watching.
The father of another one of her children showed up at her home at 4 a.m, irate. She was scared for her safety, so she snuck a cell phone to Adarian to tell him to call 911. He did. And she says when the officer showed up at her home, he had his gun drawn already. He asked everyone to get out of the home. And that's when Adarian came from around the corner of a hallway into the living room. And she says that police officer opened fire once, shooting him in the chest. Adarian was put on a ventilator at the ICU.
I want you to listen to that again.
Irate. She was scared for her safety, so she snuck a cell phone to Adarian to tell him to call 911. He did.
So I want y'all to think about this, right? Okay, so a grown, irate man is in the house. The mother is fearing for her own life and the life and safety of her children who are in the house. So she sneaks a cell phone to her 11-year-old, tells her 11-year-old to get help. Call 911. Let's get some help here, right?
Did. And she says when the officer showed up at her home, he had his gun drawn already. He asked everyone to get out of the home. And that's when Adarian came from around the corner of a hallway.
Now, I want y'all to think about this, okay? A child called. I'm sure the child, because you're saying, my mommy did it, they're going to ask. And I can't wait until the phone call and the footage actually are released. And you can bet your bottom dollar people are they're already protesting, okay? So, and they're lucky that this little boy lived. They're lucky this little boy lived, because if the little boy didn't live, Mississippi would be burning. Real talk. Now, when you listen to what they're saying, okay, a little boy, a child called to say, hey, my mommy is not safe. There's this man here, whatever, right? At that time, they ask you questions. So they know that there's a child on the phone with them, that there are other children in the house. There's the mother, and then there's this one irate, scary guy, right? They are aware of this. Despite that, despite the information that the responding officers are given by the 911 operators, what they choose to do is walk into the house with a gun drawn already. Then a small child who was on the phone with 911, remember, right? Now comes around the corner with his hands in the air. And even though this guy did not just say that, trust me, I have reviewed this several times. The child had his hands in the air. The child had his hands in the air. Okay? He was prepped by the 911 operator. He knew what he was supposed to do. He came around the corner with his hands in the air. And the cop shot him. And that's why, as he now sat there with a chest wound, a gunshot wound from the so-called help that was supposed to arrive to his house and help him and his family to prevent injury to his mother, his siblings, and himself. Now, as he lay there shot and bleeding out, right? All he could think is, what did I do wrong? This small child got shot for what? His hands were in the air.
Into the living room, and she says that police officer opened fire once, shooting him in the chest. Darian was put on a ventilator at the ICU at the University Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi, about 100 miles away. This all unfolded in a predominantly black area of the Mississippi Delta, a very impoverished community. He suffered a lacerated liver, fractured lungs, and developed a collapsed.
Of course it was an impoverished community. Of course it was. Of course it was. Because they're going to take all the rejects from all the other places where there's like middle class and above people. They take all the rejects, right? And they don't just fire cops. I don't know why. They don't fire their rejects. What they do is they just keep moving them. Like the same way that the Catholic church does with all of their shady priests, right? They just keep moving them. They do the same thing with cops, right? They will sit there and just, cops, you might get fired in this precinct, but it doesn't mean you can't get hired in the next precinct over or in the next state over. And it happens all the time, right? And so the rejects can just keep getting hired in the worst possible places, right? And so now you have this precinct for, you know, this impoverished, of course, black community. And yeah, of course you're going to have all of the worst kind of cops there. Of course you will. Right? Because you can't afford to put the rejects in, you know, the upper middle class and the, you know, the upper class neighborhoods. Oh, no. They have to have the best of the best. They have to have the ones who can think, who can logic, who can reason, who can see an 11-year-old and not shoot them, even though the 11-year-old has his hands in the air.
Developed a collapsed lung and fractured ribs, as well as a lacerated liver. All of this, Caitlin, was reportedly caught on police body camera, though that has not been released. Caitlin?
What's the sense of why that body camera footage has not been released yet?
I want to make this clear. We repeatedly called the local police department yesterday to try to get answers from them. They never got back to us after multiple messages left. But the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, they did get back to us to say that they are not releasing this body camera because of an ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, this officer has been identified as Greg Capers. The local board of aldermen voted to place him on paid administrative leave. The family and the family attorney, they're making this very clear. They want this officer charged. They want him fired. They're planning a sit-in protest at the local city hall later this morning.
Now, here's 11-year-old Darian, right? So he is recovering from his injuries. This is a recent picture. This is... I'm sorry. I'm sorry, y'all. Here's my issue is this. I want y'all to just, he's so little. This is a Darian next to the family lawyer. It's going to help them with this case. This is a grown man. This is a Darian. He's like half this man. It's not like he doesn't even have like a little teen size yet. He's a boy. He's boy sized. He's a child. You didn't mistake this for a grown man. This is a child. So I think that is number one, what really gets me. I'm going to show you all the second thing that really gets me. This is what really gets me. Ladies and gentlemen, Officer Greg Capers. Most of us, and I, myself included, I would say, and I've always said, right, that if it's a black cop that pulled up behind me, more often than not, I'm going to be slightly more afraid because there's something about them desperate to, join the thin blue line and to prove they're part of the good old boys club that can be incredibly dangerous to other Black people. But of all the things I thought I do generally think that cops are not so evil as the fact that they'd want to intentionally gun down children. They have just been conditioned, as has most of society been conditioned, to see Black people as a threat, to see melanin as a weapon, and to over-adultify our children from very young ages. And so that way, when they look at our 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds, they see grown-ass people instead of seeing children. And I've spoken to you guys about the fact that the studies have proven that just in, recent times, really since the last 20, 30 years, that their adultification of our children went from seeing 12-year-olds as adults to seeing 8-year-olds as adults. But guess what? If you are Black, then you don't have those same quirks, right? Because you were born and raised Black, you were born and raised around Black people, and so you see them accurately. When we're talking about these implicit biases and stuff, we're talking about people looking at things from a cross-cultural perspective, not from a within their own culture perspective, right? And so when I see that a Greg Capers, the cop who did this, is Black, it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it that Greg was always corrupt and always saw Black youth as a threat? Or is it that being on the force for what looks like maybe a long time, considering all the grayness, is that what turned you into seeing all young Black boys as a threat? And I don't know. I don't know the answer. But what I do know is that he's very lucky Mississippi's not burning right now. And that's only because that young man survived. Adarian Murray survived. No thanks to him. But I really hope that this criminal charges must be brought here. They must be. And I hate when it's the fact that, honestly, every time a non-white cop does something wrong, they always bring the criminal charges, right? They're always holding cops accountable, but the only cops they'll hold accountable, generally are the non-white ones. And I hate that. But you know what? No, I'm going to be 100% right there advocating, right here, throw him under the jail. Because not only did you damn near kill that boy, you shot that boy with his hands up. You shot that boy when your information was that there was an 11-year-old boy who was calling you to begin with. You shot that boy in his own home. You a Black face, shot that boy, another Black face. He will never trust another Black cop. The amount of harm that you did here on so many different levels. Because, we want to encourage Black people to sign up, become cops, and, so that way we can have our own on the force. But then we're not going to trust our own if this is every time that we hear this is the end result. It's worse. It feels like the end result is worse when the cop is Black. So, no, I really hope that he's not only right now he's on, paid administrative leave, the normal company line. But no, I really, really want him to suffer consequences for this. And I really, really want Adarian to see him suffer consequences for this. And I really want to see cops, but especially Black cops, now come out in force and speak out against this man.
You about to lose your job. Get this